about digital citizenship. So on this panel, we want to represent different sectors. So we have Dina Alexander representing nonprofit, Mark Babbitt representing business, Jeremy Bond representing the perspective of a parent, Adam Moore, is Adam here? Adam, come on up. Adam Moore representing he's a therapist. Kemi is going to bring in our international perspective. Carrie Rogers-Whitehead will talk about STEM. Dani Sloan, education, and Keven Stratton bring the perspective of a legislator. And we also added 2 youth. Unfortunately, I didn't get it out on the slide. So my apologies to Becca Linford and to Curran Dee. Curran is an elementary school student. Becca is a high school student. So they will be bringing perspectives from 2 different age groups. And each of them will just share what digital citizenship means to them and why it matters to them in their work or their sector or from their perspective. As you listen to them, think about what digital citizenship means to you. And so please introduce yourself.
She's asking if there'll be a one.
No, we actually have, where's Aubrey? So she's back there, she'll give you one. Okay, all right.
All right. I'm Dani Sloan. I'm a trainer for the Utah Education Network, and I'm president of the Utah Coalition for Educational Technology. And I also teach pre-service teachers at the University of Utah. And when I'm talking about digital citizenship, a lot of times I'm talking about storytelling and encouraging educators to tell their story. A lot of times what we hear of education is really, really negative. And it's not necessarily what's actually happening in classrooms. I hear from parents a lot like, oh, education is broken, but my kid's school is great, right? Because we all know what we know. And I think teachers tend to be some of the most humble people. And so they're not necessarily out there bragging and sharing all the wonderful things that are happening in their classrooms. And so a lot of what I do when I talk about digital citizenship for teachers is encouraging them to model. And we forget about that a lot. I have a lot of teachers say like, oh, I'm a great digital citizen. I never cyberbully ever. In fact, I'm not even on Facebook. And so we talk about where we take it back to what citizenship is, and that there's an element of participation when it comes to citizenship, right? So if I were outside and there was trash on the ground and I walked past it, would that be being a good citizen? Probably not. What about if I chose not to vote every single year? That's probably not being a great citizen either. And so we talk about to be a good digital citizen, you have to participate as well. You can't just stay off of it and say that you're a great citizen. So I try and get teachers to choose a social media platform to share the great things that are happening in their classes. And a lot of times that looks like having a student help them. Okay, and it's okay that our students are experts in social media, because they are. I always say that they're probably going to be more adept at this forever than you will, and that's okay. And I taught 4th grade, and when I was in the classroom, we had a 4th grade Twitter account. And each day, our PR person, or the class tweeter, had to tweet out, before morning recess, at lunch recess, and afternoon recess, what was going on during the day. And then they put their initials, so we made sure we kept our students' names anonymous, but our parents who followed the account would know, if DS was me, and that would be really exciting. So then when they'd go home for, dinner, and they'd sit around the table and they'd ask the question, what did you do at school today? Everyone, what's the answer? Nothing. I didn't do anything. We sat around and stared at each other.
It was boring.
Yeah. Mom and Dad could say, oh, really? Let's look at your Twitter feed. Oh, you made sedimentary sandwiches today in science. And they would have something to talk about that was positive so that they could really bridge that gap between home and school. So I think what's most important to me about digital citizenship is the storytelling aspect and making sure that teachers are kind of changing the narrative of what's happening in education. So it's not always just this negative talk about budgets and tests, but actually the experiences that our students are having in the classroom.
Okay, my name is Carrie. I'm from Nigeria, and I'm from a country where technology adoption is just kind of, we're still on the beginner's level. And I think for me, digital citizenship is knowing how to use technology appropriately. And it's very important. I believe, as an educator, I work with the Faculty of Education and the university also. We train pre-service and in-service teachers. I'm actually in the educational technology unit. And so besides working in university, I also help schools with technology integration. We really don't have much of the issues we have in the Western world because we have just very few schools who have the one-to-one initiatives. But we have our kids having access to mobile devices, phones, and thanks to China, these phones are cheaper and more accessible, and we have internet access becoming cheaper for people to access. Look, we have people going online, and I think it's important at this point in time that we begin to teach them what to do when they go online. In Africa, we have this proverb that says that it takes a community to raise a child. And so I'm happy about what's happening here today because everybody has a part to play in raising up a child in the digital space. So there's the aspect for the school to do, but there's also the place for the parents and even the technology providers. And so it's important that we have this discourse, and especially for us who are just, so that we don't have the problems that some of the Western country who are more advanced already have, and we can nip it at the bud if we, at this initial stage, begin to drive this digital citizenship, teach respect, because it's not a dark, you have, we're discussing this morning, and sometimes we forget that we are creating a personality with what and how we use the digital space. And sometimes, because these kids don't know, they are developing a digital footprint that one day somebody is going to use to judge who they are. You come out of school and you're sending an application, and your employer is going through your profile, wanting to know, this is what you have on your CV, but is this who you really are? And it's very important that they know this and they deliberately place positive footprints on the digital space. So I think digital citizenship, literacy is something which we would embrace, and I'm happy that this discourse is here. I'm happy to be here, hoping to learn a lot and see how we can begin to drive this discourse also back in our country, and hopefully with the schools I work with and even at my university to see how we can introduce the digital literacy course even as a program and in my school. And I'm sure that it took a lot of way, it took a long way in helping us use technology appropriately, and so we don't have, because right now we have a lot of bad rep where technology uses. I see it, even for adults, kids, everybody just believes when they can say what they, because they think they don't have a face to the space, so that they can say what they like, do what they like, and think they can get away with it, not realizing that they're actually building a profile for themselves. But I believe with change, with this kind of discourse, with whatever I learned from here, a little change in my own little corner ripples over, and then we have a larger effect of good use of technology. Thank you.
Hello. We offer a holistic, intensive digital citizenship summer camps, workshops for students. So, did you go in and out? So we offer these to students, and Michelle asked me to come here to talk about STEM, because we have had this conversation before. What's the relation between STEM and digital citizenship? How do they work together? Often we see kind of STEM over here, digital citizenship over here, a little more separate. And we had thought where is the connection there? There was a connection, but it was hard to figure it out. But we actually created pre- and post-test surveys from our camps. So we wanted to know what the relation between STEM and tech careers if you were more better digital citizen. So we ran these camps, and we found that those who had a better understanding of digital citizenship and had been through the camps were more interested in STEM and tech careers. And that was really great to see. Now we can finally find a linkage between the two. And it got me thinking, why? Why would you be more interested in a STEM and tech career if you were a better digital citizen? And I'd love to hear the group and continue this conversation, but if you are more comfortable being online, it's not as scary. The tech and the STEM career is not as scary. It's not as hard to enter. So I really want to expand this conversation on STEM because we do often talk about these things in silos, like they're separate. But if you are a better digital citizenship, the data that we have so far shows that you are more interested and comfortable in STEM and tech careers. I know this is not working very well. I hope you can hear me well, but I hope that we can bring the STEM educators, we can bring the digital citizenship people together to talk about this and the connection between the two. Thank you.
So my name is Becca Linford. I am a student at Mason Preparatory Academy in Linden, and what I want to talk about is about being a good citizen, especially because this past Monday, my math teacher became an American citizen, and I started to think about what were the requirements, and I looked it up, and one of them is having a good moral character, and so I thought about that as necessary in the digital realm as well, because the digital world is just as much as our world as real life. I think if we're, sweet. I think that if we are, oh wow, what's my having good moral character online is just as important because so much what I see in high school is all of what we do is connected with what we see online. A lot of our conversations happen in what we saw on Instagram or Twitter, and so if we are being two-faced, being a different person online as we are different from who we are as a person, there's a disconnect, and I think that the community that we can create in high school can crumble a little bit because of that. So I find that having that good character and knowing how to strengthen and build other people through technology is how we can have better digital citizenship, and that's why it's important to me.
So my name is Mark Babbitt. I think what people in Silicon Valley would call a social entrepreneur. I now have 4 communities that I'm helping grow using social for good. We run U-Turn. My wife and I, Deb, sitting over there, run U-Turn, which is a community that helps college students with personal branding, internships, apprenticeships, finding good mentors before they enter the workplace, and hopefully be more successful as a result. We're launching forwardheroes.org, which helps our military veterans transition to their civilian careers. A huge problem right now with the divorce rates, suicide rates, unemployment rates. We have a workplace leadership site called Work IQ, which one of our tenants is corporate social intelligence. And now we're helping the business side of the Digital Citizenship Institute make this even more global and bigger and more fruitful. So why did I tell you all that? Because I'd like to think I'm one of those old white guys that's actually living and breathing social for good. It was an accident. They drugged me into using social and digital media, kicking and screaming. It was certainly not in our business plan, but it's the way it worked out, and we haven't looked backwards since. So what's most important to me is this. As my table knows, I coach a lot of sports and a lot of baseball. And the first, let's call it phase 1 of social media and digital citizenship, we did a lot of talking at our students, at our children, at our mentees. We didn't talk with them. We didn't ask what was important to them. At the same time, they knew more about us, more about it than we did sometimes, right? We were the sage on a stage talking to people who were actually more involved in using it than I did. And not just the technology and not just social media. My 10-year-old sitting over there, we walked into an Apple store one time because, again, they made me get into this, my U-Turn crew. And they said, look, you're going to have to get an iPad because we can't develop apps on your 10-year-old laptop. So we went and got an iPad. I didn't know how to turn it on. In the Apple store, it was very quiet and very loudly. I was only a 3-year-old when he goes, no, Dad, over here. Turn it on and just start using the thing. And it was so intuitive to him. And it occurred to me that's exactly how social media should be. We shouldn't be talking at people. We should be talking with them, right? And so that's kind of our role. The other thing I'll say is, and Michelle and I have talked about Michelle though. She's hiding. There you are. We've talked about this so much. We as adults, as mentors, as teachers, as coaches, we need to stop talking about the why you should be a good digital citizen, and actually start talking about the what and the how. And more importantly, in the process, we need to be role models while we're doing that. We look at our, especially here in the U.S., I talked to Kim about this last night, our political nightmare that's happening here. We are definitely not being good role models. This is what our children are seeing. This is how they think this is normal, and we need to be better digital citizens ourselves. We need to not just talk about the what and the how, but actually start living it.
Hi, my name is Curran Dee. I'm 11 years old, and I'm the Chief Kid Officer of Digital Kids. Digital Kids is digital citizenship for kids by kids. We promote all the awesome stuff kids are doing on and offline, and we do monthly challenges. In classrooms, we do classroom ambassadors. We've done an empathy challenge, and we've done a Minecraft EDU challenge, and we've done so many others. I've spoken in the UK, I'm speaking here right now. I've spoken in Mexico, I've spoken in Nigeria, I've spoken at Twitter headquarters. I was a student night speaker at ISTE in front of over 2,000 educators, which was really fun. And what does digital citizenship mean to me? Well, if you ask 10 different people, you would get 10 different answers. But what I think it means is being safe, responsible, and using tech for good online. And why does it matter? Because we need to talk with kids, not at kids. We need to promote all the awesome stuff kids and adults are doing online, not like as you see all the headlines on the news about all the bad things. And it's really important because tons of kids around the world are doing awesome things, but nobody, it's not like in the headlines, nobody's like acknowledging it because all of the bad things are getting acknowledged, which is not good. So we need to acknowledge all the awesome stuff kids are doing on and offline. And thank you.
4 minutes really goes fast. I second everything Curran says, as well as everything everybody said. So I'm thinking about this question, why am I so drawn to this as a non-techie? Because I love Twitter, but I don't really have any other loves on technology. So why has this been so, why have I been so passionate about this? And why is there such a disconnect between, our positive, lofty vision of tech as we have in this room and what we see out there, as Kurt described, a lot of negativity.
Will you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Jeremy Bonds. I'm here representing the parent role. But I work for an education agency that provides professional development for schools. So in answering the question I just gave, one of the things that I think about is why is it that because I happen to work in education, but I'm not a teacher. I'm lucky enough to have access to certain things, certain knowledge. And then when I got on Twitter, I got on all these Twitter chats I happen to have access to all these educators around the world. And so when I think about the importance of digital citizenship, in addition to all the things everyone's talked about, I think about access and I think about everyone having a voice at the table. Parents need a voice, students need a voice, and this is what technology offers is a bigger platform than we've ever had in history. So that when we talk about technology from a negative standpoint, I'm kind of puzzled by that. And I think part of the reason it turns negative is that those voices aren't really out there. So in the absence of adult guidance for how to use technology, for connecting with technology, kids kind of go on their own, and adults kind of go on their own, and we see the kind of national of the world kind of negativity that you were talking about. When there's really no reason for that, and I think part of the reason for that is that people feeling like they don't have a voice and that they're expressing themselves in a negative way to kind of get that out there. And the opportunity of digital citizenship is to get people's voices there in a positive way. So I really think that's a big reason of why we're here. So I think we've seen this played out, again, kind of on the education level as well as on the global level. So I don't think we're here in isolation just talking about this one particular interest that we have. I think that this has real national implications, and that it's, I think, did I hear you say crisis or something like that? But I've certainly, I think that we have a role here in changing what's happening. And so I think our voice as digital citizens is the most important thing of all.
Hi, my name is Dina Alexander. I'm the president of a nonprofit called Educate and Empower Kids. We started out a little more than 4 years ago, and we started out just talking about online safety to parents, helping parents talk with their kids, and particularly about the dangers of pornography. And of course, talking about its opposite, healthy sexuality. And as we've developed that and talked about that over the years, it has been, it's been a difficult process. I mean, people are scared, not just of porn, but of everything else online. So we have a lot of parents coming to us in fear, in terror, not knowing what to do, feeling like they have no voice, and they're not sure where to start with their kids. It was about a year ago. I was talking with Michelle and just kind of doing some research when she first introduced me to the term digital citizenship. So I started doing some research, looking, and I was like, this is one of the answers. This is the next step for us. It's no longer enough for us to talk with parents, teachers, anybody about just stemming the tide of dangers. It's time to kind of go on that offensive. I feel like parents are living very defensively. Stop this, don't do that, don't touch that. And it's time to just switch that role. It's empowering, it feels better, it helps kids learn better. I know I learn better from a positive experience versus a fear-based experience. This year, next week, we're coming out with our first book on digital citizenship. And this is it, and the reason why I'm showing it to you right now is that we had to change the subtitle. It's called Noah's New Phone, and up until a few weeks ago, the subtitle was A Story About Digital Citizenship. However, we could not find one parent in any of our focus groups or any of the community groups that we've spoken about who knew what digital citizenship was. And that's not good. We can do better. We need to do better. It blows my mind that we've kind of abdicated that, and it's not because of your fault. I think it's because of parents not taking that initiative. So the subtitle now is A Story About Using Technology for Good. And so we have kind of abdicated that responsibility to teachers in schools. Like, oh yeah, you guys, you go teach that. I'll be over here, right? And so it's the same thing with media literacy and digital literacy and multimedia literacy. And it's kind of like, okay, so I'm hoping with my different opportunities to start talking about that more with parents. We have in the last few months, and it's kind of the next step for us is helping them. So I found, and it was funny, I found this quote today that made sense to me because, again, with talking with parents, and I'm sure you guys feel the same way, we sometimes feel like, can I do enough? Am I doing enough? Can I do this the right way? So many parents are afraid they're going to screw this up. They're not going to be perfect. And one of the things that I think is helpful to parents is there's no perfect way. I have not spoken to any expert in any field that is a parent who doesn't have a hilarious horror story of how they screwed this up with their own kids. Okay, and that's talking with sex ed experts, that's talking with people in fighting pornography and in digital systems. They all have this hilarious story of the wrong thing they said. So I found this quote this morning. It's from Tolkien, and it's from, I'm not a big Tolkien person, but this is from The Return of the King, and it says, "It is not our part to master all the tides of the world, but to do what is in us for the succor of those years wherein we are set, uprooting the evil in the fields that we know, so that those who live after may have clean earth to till." And I just love that. It's like that we can give that to our kids, to anybody in the community, that we can create those ripples and create that clean earth to till in any field, in every field. So that's what I'm hoping to
Hello there, I'm Adam Moore. I'm a marriage and family therapist. So 25 years ago, I was born. No, I'm just kidding. I was 15. And I was a Boy Scout, And I remember I was working on my Citizenship in the World merit badge. And I remember thinking at the time, okay, Boy Scouts of America, I think we're getting a little overzealous here. I'm in California. I've got peers who are not entirely certain, and this is true, whether California is a city, state, or a country. And so maybe we need to tone it down here a little bit about being in the world here, because we were just trying to survive in our little town. But the world in the last 25 years has gotten a lot smaller. I don't know if you've noticed that. But I can wake up and before breakfast, I can have communicated with somebody in Bulgaria and Japan. I can even see a picture of what they ate for breakfast if I want on social media. And so things have really changed dramatically. Now my role, what I do is I'm a therapist and I work with sexual addiction, pornography addiction. So I'm working with people who have already sort of crossed that line to where their usage of digital media has gone to a place where they can't function normally anymore. They're utilizing it in a way that is sucking them into a completely altered state of being. And I think one of the challenges that we face is that parents, or even the teens that I work with, or the adults that I work with, their main approach is an avoidance approach, like Dina was talking about. If we can just maybe not see it, or let's just try to avoid it, hopefully we don't run into it, and if you do see it, just make sure you close your eyes, or whatever that is, then everything's going to be okay. But the truth is, everything is not okay. It's not working out well. I have a 2-year wait list. That's not a good sign for the level of problems that we're seeing. So I've noticed this in a counseling environment where people are coming in and they're going, okay, I'm just doing everything in my power to avoid. Avoidance is a really interesting approach because it gives people a false sense of success. Because as long as you're avoiding something, if that's your main goal, as long as you're avoiding it, even if you're avoiding it by accident, you feel successful. You feel like, oh, I'm doing such a good job at not doing that thing I'm not supposed to do. Even if it's completely by accident, because you just happen to not have enough time to do it, or you just haven't run into it yet. So I'm helping people to shift from an avoidance mindset to a proactive approach where they're going after something, an eagerness mindset. Okay? And that is, what am I going after? The 2 questions I ask people are, who are you? So identify your character traits, your identity, who are you, what do you want to be, and then what meaningful contribution do you want to make to the world? And again, it's legitimate now that you can make a meaningful contribution to the world from a small town in California, or a small town in Utah, or a small town in Nigeria, because we are all much more interconnected than we've ever been. If we can help people shift that mindset to, who am I, what meaningful contribution do I want to make, and what is my proactive stance to go after that, then we can get out of that avoidance mindset and really start making some progress.
It's good to be with you today. And my name is Keven Stratton. I have been asked to be here, I believe, because of my role in the government. I'm a member of the state legislature here in the state of Utah. I'd like to talk briefly about a bill that we worked on and was passed in the 2015 general session. It found its roots in 2013, 4 years ago. There was in my area that I have the opportunity to represent, we had a fairly innocent interaction in a negative way with technology in the school. And we began to recognize, as many of the panelists talked about, the challenge piece of technology. When we look at technology, it's a remarkable resource for us. Tremendous. I'm not sure as I sit down sometimes if it's not as important as food, as I look at how I interact with the wonderful youth that are in this rising generation. Well, anytime we have something so powerful, it can be used to the extreme for good, and certainly to the extreme for the opposite of good. And as we look at the role of government, and what is digital citizenship, and why does it matter, Certainly, this meeting today is an example. This is not sponsored by a governmental body. But we want to make sure for good governance to make sure that we're not getting in the way of citizens like all of you doing the things that can bring about the type of society and the type of communities and nations that we want to have across the world. So as we look at this process that we went through in 2014 and culminated in 2015 in creating this piece of legislation, we recognize in order to bring out the good, in order to see that this tremendous resources is maximized, we really need to have all hands on deck. So we created a circumstance, a situation, a pattern in our public schools here in the state of Utah. We have what is referred to as school community councils, and each school has a council made up of parents and educators and the stakeholders for the children. And we ask that they be empowered and they be given resources to begin to look at the opportunities and create positive direction with technology and put up some safeties safety nets to protect the non-positive use of technology. The title of the bill, House Bill 213, was Safe Technology Utilization and Digital Citizenship in Public Schools. It's what I call a piece of legislation of first impression. We couldn't look to any other piece that had been done. First of all, the name, we wanted to make sure that it incorporates that there is safe technology. It can be safe, but we need to utilize it for the good and the benefit of all that are involved. And then we came up with this notion, in working with some great minds, many of them here in the room, digital citizenship. What does digital citizenship mean? And for the first time, we put into code the definition of what digital citizenship is. And I'll just share this with you. So, and that's why does it matter and what is it? It says digital citizenship means the norms of appropriate, responsible, and healthy behavior related to technology use, including digital literacy, ethics, etiquette, and security. So for the first time, we had a definition codified that we could build on. Certainly, nothing is perfect from the beginning, and it evolves, and it's been wonderful to see what's taken place. Why is this important from a governmental perspective? Well, a governmental body is charged with health, safety, and welfare of the citizens. The government is not to rule the people, but is of the people. And as we look at that critical role, there's certainly aspects of health and safety and protection. The safe technology, digital system deals with people, but there's also economic issues and a great, all the utilization of that wonderful resource comes into play as we look at the opportunities and the roles that we can have technology play in making our life and our interaction with one another enhanced and bring to the fullest of what it can be. So quickly, that's the short summary, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you to our panel. Wasn't that awesome to hear all this perspective? Okay, we have a few minutes. Would you like to engage the panel with some question and answer, or would you like to share some of your own thoughts that you've had as you've been sitting here listening? Does anybody have any thoughts? What does digital citizenship mean to you? Why does it matter? Or do you have a question for the panel?
Hi, Becca. I teach a digital citizenship class at the school that I teach at. And so what is your number one piece of advice of how we end the disconnect of how we act in person versus how we act online?
I think the biggest thing is think before you post. I think that is the same thing with what what you say just around people. If something offends you, you think before you say something. You think before you act. And I think it should be the same thing with social media. You think before you post. Because when you're in a very emotional place, what you post is not usually who you are, and maybe you're trying to be who you are, but but maybe taking that gap and thinking about it before you post helps, or not posting helps allow the two faces that could be created come to one.
Good morning, my name is Paul Comeau. I'm a teacher at a boys Jesuit high school in Buffalo, New York, and I chair our Digital Citizenship Committee. I wanted to comment on, partially in response to that last question, but one of the realizations that we've come to in working with our boys is that as adults, as teachers, part of what we're doing, probably inadvertently, is we're creating maybe what's a false dichotomy when we talk about online life versus real life. And we've made a conscious effort to stop using that distinction. And I think that it's something that's so obvious when we recognize it, and yet it's easy to miss when we continuously say what we do online versus what we do in real life. Right there, we're causing a problem. And so we've tried to be very cognizant to make sure that in our language, we eliminate making that distinction, because it really no longer is one. That's something that we found to be important. I don't know if that speaks to your question at all, but it's an observation I wanted to share. Thanks.
Thanks so much. I saw another hand over here.
Thank you, James Grew here. A quick question for Kevin, if that's okay. I'd just like to congratulate him on the great leadership for the state of Utah with the legislation that was passed. I wonder if there's any work going underway to review the effectiveness of the legislation, and also some of the projects that have been kicked off as a result of that.
Great question, thank you. And again, I do not take credit. I was grateful to be involved in this, and a lot of great minds went in it, and it's wonderful to see the fruition. We have, part of the piece of legislation was the aspect of the reporting back. So each school community council reports to the district. We have in our state 44 school districts and about 1,000 plus schools. We're educating about 650,000 students, so probably more, deeper dive than you wanted, but so that's the audience we're seeking to do and help. And what part of that is that reporting back that creates an opportunity then to see that these issues are addressed. The school community council has been given, we have what is called school institutional trust land funds, and those are funds that are given to each school. And part of the legislation allowed projects within this digital citizenship to be funded by those funds that are coming to the school. And so there's funds available as well as the community. So, and this is wonderful. I'm from New York, the digital citizenship, and across the world what's taking place, but and the teacher here, that's the courses. Initially there was how do we work through this, and so there was, for example, projects of at the young schools. We had this Just Say No to Drugs campaign. It really has been effective through time, and so there's we called it a White Ribbon Week. So there was an opportunity for funding for that took place, a focus in this the whole school. Other opportunities we've looked at doing is having some projects that are in each school on how can we appropriately use technology in a positive way, and what are we doing in terms of communication. We talked about social media and all the resources that are available there. So that would be an example. I think, Michelle, you may have some input on some of the specific projects that have been
Can you talk to the measurement, if any kind of measurement efforts that are being made? I know that Paula does surveys at the end of each year.
Yeah, there was, in terms of at this stage of the game, the measurement in terms of abuse, some of the things we're doing is trying to introduce technology in the schools. We recognize one of the genesis of this is there are some measurements of availability and quantity of the tool that's used. For example, a handheld device for every student, for example, to help enhance their education. As we potentially have that discussion here in the state, there's several schools that is the case. And so there's the specific measurement issues that you're talking about were meant to be reflected in the evaluations of the feedback that came back from the project. So that's how I would offer that, and we probably could need to look at better ways to do it. Now, any input that you'd have today or tomorrow or this time would be very, very helpful. And this is how good legislation is created and feedback. So thank you.
Other thoughts?
Hi, this question is mostly for Dina, but I'm curious if anyone else wants to weigh in also. So I'm Jessica, I work at Brave Hop in New York, and we have an animated video series. Oh, great. So basically we create these videos that answer questions that kids have. Another hat that I wear is I do a talk for parents, also in New York, about kids and social media, and the issue of pornography has been like a really challenging one for me to address in a room. So I'm just wondering if you have any ways, or more specific ways that you've been able to like turn that fear-based approach around and have more like, as you said, Adam, the eagerness, or a different mindset around it, create that space to talk about.
I have lots. I'll give you the PowerPoints. It's mostly about, again, it's that letting go. Like, you're not going to be perfect in having these discussions, right? None of us as teachers, as parents, there's no such thing as perfection. So that is one of the first things that helps parents go, oh, okay, that's right. I just have to do my best. That's it. The second is to talk about, when you talk about porn, is you got to talk about the opposite. So I'm like, if you want your kids to know what real intimacy is and what a real relationship is, you need to talk about it. You need to help them understand what real sexuality, what real intimacy is. So that's helpful. And then of course, starting as young as possible. So like we have sex talks books. We have 30 days of sex talks, right? For age 3 to 7, 8 to 11, 12 plus. Of course, people freak out. 3 to 7? Are you kidding? And there is a pornography lesson in there. And it's like 3 points, right? It's super simple, but again, it's like, I want to be the source, right? Because we tend to believe the first source we hear, so we tell parents, be that first source on digital citizenship, on how to behave on this, on everything. Be the source so that that again helps them feel a little more empowered. Like, that's right, okay, I can do this. And it's just baby steps. So you're not going to have one big porn talk. You're not going to have one big sex talk. It's little talks. So I think that helps parents for sure. Same thing with digital citizenship. You're not going to have one digital citizenship meeting and be like, okay, job done, right? Now you know. I look at it as like, think of how many times we taught our kids how to tie their shoes. Right? Did you just throw them a pair of shoes and be like, there you go, Merry Christmas? But that's what we do with phones, that's what we do with a lot of things, and it's kind of like, it's that step-by-step process that it's repeated over and over again. So same thing with anything, I think tech, is we just have to go, wait a second. But again, it's like Michelle talked about safety, is we have to talk about the negatives too, but also let them know, like, you can do this. Like, it's not the end of the world, and it is so important to talk about it. I could talk about porn all day, so I'm gonna just stop.
All right, I'm gonna ask Adam to add, but just, I would like, Deanna, is Kristin here yet?
We love you.
Can you please raise your hand if you've done work in porn prevention, because I want Jessica and others to be able to see who's there to give resources. We've got Vonna, we have Deanna. Oh, this is people who have resources to share. So please raise your hand if you have resources to share on pornography prevention, okay? And Kristin Jensen from Protect Young Lungs will be here shortly. She's written a book called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, and they just came out with a Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior to be able to open up conversations with younger children too. So, Adam, do you have any thoughts to add?
Sure. I think the biggest fear that adults have, and it's a kind of a bizarrely hilarious fear, is that we're going to make kids curious, as if we don't want kids curious, or as if we can stop them from being curious. We want kids to be curious because that's how they learn and that's how they grow and develop, but what we want them to do is be curious with us, and we want them to be curious in a more public way, because what happens is if they feel afraid, and what they do is they pick up on the fear of the adults. So kids are super smart. They go, uh-oh, these adults are terrified of this conversation. I'm going to go ahead and not talk about it to protect the adults from their emotions they can't seem to manage for themselves. That's what's happening with kids. Because I see them 30 years later in therapy and they're telling me this is what's going on. And so, you know, if you need to stand in front of the mirror and say pornography 500 times until it's comfortable, then you do that. If you need to, you know, do the talk with a stuffed animal or whatever, like whatever you need to do with a spouse, with a friend, as you're practicing and getting more comfortable, kids will pick up on, oh, this is totally normal to talk about. I think that's extremely important. I think that we get in our own way most of the time is the issue. So we want to encourage curiosity. We want to encourage the kids to be interested in their bodies, interested in all these topics, and interested in a way where they feel comfortable talking to the adults that care about them so they don't have to turn to pornography to be educated about pornography, or to their peers who don't know what they're talking about either to be educated about it. And so if we're comfortable and safe and it's open conversation, kids will pick up on it. And you know, I've got kids ranging from 9 down to 2, and every time my kids get on the computer at all, I say, okay, now remind me, what are the rules? And we talk about them. They say, okay, we do it in public. I say, what if you see something that looks like pornography? Well, I tell you, and we shut it down, we talk about it. So, you know, there's this ongoing dialogue, and I've got friends who do this as well, and they went through the mall one day and they saw there was a giant underwear ad in front of one of the stores, and the little girl went, "It's pornography!" You know, yelled in front of the mall, and it was like, this is cool, you know, this is cool for the kids to be able to talk about it without fear. That changes the dynamic entirely.
So I'm just going to add that in working with Keven, Epic created a site called digcitutah.com, and it has a ton of resources. There are a lot of resources out there, so this is one of the purposes, is to be able to connect with each other and share resource both on preventing the negative and on leveraging the positive. I will also point out that this afternoon we have a national expert on prevention science who will be addressing you, and he has some really powerful principles to teach. So any kind of addiction prevention has shared principles. So he's going to be talking about prevention science and all of the other kinds of issues that are non-digital, and we'll be talking about how they apply. So we'll have a lot to talk about there. I think we've got time for one more thought or question before the break.
So my question is for Curran. I have a brother your age, and he's starting to get interested in social media. I was wondering, what's a good phrase or language to use when talking to him and explaining how to use it for good, and what's something that you felt was helpful in when you were learning to engage in digital spaces?
So how I actually learned was at my mom's college classes. I went there when she couldn't find a babysitter for me when I was like a little toddler, and I would do all the projects with college kids. And I think to talk about like digital access and digital citizenship, more of a positive, not more of a negative.
Can I just add in as the mom that, you know, our journey together as a mother and son has been learning side by side. And then when he did come as a toddler to my grad and undergraduate classes, everybody wanted him as their partner. Hey, I want him, he's staying. I want him, you work with me. And so he's really had a great opportunity to have, and there are a lot of people in this room that are considered part of, like, you know, you have a neighborhood watch. At my age, you used to have a neighborhood watch, right? So if something was happening in the neighborhood, like the neighborhood, like, took care of you. He has an online neighborhood watch, and if I wasn't there to answer something, there are so many people that have become that. So I would say it's really this collective community approach. What would you have anything? I mean, that's yeah, that kids count, and this is, you know, this is the best teaching day I've ever had. And to go back to some of the parent comments, like, you got to take ownership And like, yeah, I might not have anybody that I can ask that was before me. How did you do this? How should I do this? Yeah, I'm gonna mess up. When he's 13, is he gonna make mistakes? Well, you're supposed to make mistakes when you're 13. But I'm hoping what we've done as this, like I've called like driver's ed, you know, where we're learning together, we're learning the rules of the road together, that when he turns 13, he's gonna be a little bit more mindful. That's my hope, but I'm expecting mistakes, bring them.
I'm just going to add one thought in a non-digital way. When my kids were little, I used to, you know, go clean your room. And I had a picture in my head of what that meant, but it took me a while to figure out that they really needed me there with them, because what it meant to me and what it meant to their younger minds did not translate. And so I think these values that we have here, side by side from the get-go, is really important. That we learn with them, we learn from them, and we engage in a conversation long before the devices are actually even an option. That we create a culture in our homes and in our schools and in our communities where that side-by-side learning is happening, so we're not, as many have said, talking at kids, but engaging with them in this, because we're learning together. This is a continuous learning process for all of us. There's no pat answer. You know, we aren't going to get a curriculum that is going to solve all of our problems, or a book, or a resource. The reason we're doing this here is to model for ourselves and for others this idea of continuous conversation. So, all right, I'm going to send you to break a few minutes early. Please be back in your seats a few minutes before 11, and we'll move on to the next session. Good hour.